I think the school community has been trying to say, are there ideas around a middle school campus? Is there an idea around what a actual dual language track could look like? Right now, that school feeds into Jefferson Middle School, which does not have it has some Spanish classes, but it is not anything close to a dual language. So if we are trying to compete for parents to choose DCPS, it's really hard when you're telling that family, let's choose the dual language track for elementary school, but we don't really have a path for you after that, because what's going to happen is those parents are going to opt out in 5th grade. They're going to look for charter school options that are providing dual language options, and DCPS is going to lose those students and families from their system. So I am frustrated the chancellor isn't taking this more seriously and being willing to really engage in a true and meaningful feasibility study and map out a plan. I know you and I will talk about this and try to think about how do we actually get them to do it and actually do this feasibility study in earnest. But I'm glad that we put some funding in there. I think it says something to our Chisholm community that we are trying. I want to also thank you for making sure the position's there for our permanent residency visas, at least for the educators who made promises to. I think I know when I think about Capitol Hill Montessori at Logan, which is in Ward 6, or other schools that actually have a lot of amazing educators that have come through this, it's important. Thank you for accepting, not that I thought you'd send it back, but the funding for the Department of Buildings to make sure that we actually can build out a higher level program manager to think about how we work on our green buildings. This is a space where we've worked with a lot of industry stakeholders around how we're compliant with our different climate and clean energy goals. And Department of Buildings has an opportunity there to have somebody in a more leadership position who can help all those buildings there. A lot of things have been talked about. I'll just note, I am also still concerned that we actually have our pay equity fund missing about $10 million. And so I would like us to continue to focus on that. And then I'll just note, there was a subtitle on vacant commercial lots that I don't think is making it through the little cow, but
correct. We recommend striking it.
I might not completely agree on that one. Again, you're batting like 99% on this one, but that one, I do think we have a lot of vacant commercial lots and some challenges with some vacant properties. And so I would love to continue to work with you on that. I think along the H Street Northeast corridor, or some other spaces where we've had some really persistent vacant properties, and would love to think about what that could look like, or if there's modifications to what was suggested, ways to look at that. But Mr. Chairman, I look forward to supporting this. Appreciate you and your team's hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say something on that subtitle. I know, but you did. So the vacant lots, this is unimproved vacant lots. And at the hearing with the Department of Buildings, there was discussion about this. The mayor's proposed budget has no additional resources for implementing this subtitle. I hope this isn't a surprise to folks. I hope you haven't noticed that there's subtitles that might be in your committees where there was no additional resources. The department said they thought there were about 300 lots that would be affected by this. By our count, it's about 3,000 lots that are affected by this. There is an exception in the subtitle for properties where it's not economically feasible to develop them, or where it is not permitted under zoning. And that is, it would require a variance or something. And those terms are to some extent undefined. And so it was pretty clear that this would be a real burden to implement, since anybody could say, well, it's not economically feasible. And then what's the determination process? When I asked, well, the director said, well, we'll have a multi-agency, different agencies will talk, but there's nothing written out regarding that. I lost my train of thought. In addition, the language in the subtitle is based on the existing statute. And as you know, there's a vacant through vibrant bill that's going through the council, which rewrites the statute. So the subtitle doesn't even conform with the legislative changes that we're adopting. So for multiple reasons, that's why we rejected it. This is one of those issues where if the executive really wants to do this, then it should be freestanding and give us time to work through how this would be implemented, how do you figure out that which is not buildable? How do you figure out that which is economically not feasible to be developed? And to also rewrite the language so that it would conform with the vacant to vibrant law. A lot of complications. There's a lineup. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Pinto, and I realized that the two members online have their hands up. So you'll be next after Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. I am so excited about the BSA inclusion of the structured literacy training. This has been something that we've been working on together for several years. I know your team has done a lot of hard work on this. So many advocates and teachers, and I want to give a special shout out to our Ward 2 State Board of Education rep, Alistair Chang, who has been focused on this issue for 5 years, at least, since I've been working with him. And this is going to empower our teachers to learn how to teach reading. Reading is not an intuitive skill, but if we ensure that our teachers have the structured skills on how to teach the science of reading to our kids, I think we will make the most meaningful progress towards addressing our literacy rate and setting up our kids with the most foundational thing that we can teach them, which is how to read. So I am so thrilled. I think this is going to set our kids up for success for decades to come. And so thank you so much for that inclusion. There are a number of other things in this committee report that I think are excellent. I'm thrilled about the adult education funding, which is another important program that we need to continue to invest in and doesn't always have enough attention on, in my view, but is really important. The support for P-Keep, which so many of our families rely on, and we have to do more as a city to invest in our families with young children to make sure that they have what they need. Early childhood education, stabilizing purchasing power for our schools, the safe transportation for students to school and out of school activities. This is one of the biggest pieces of feedback when I talk to kids about why they are or not going to out of school time activities that may be available to them. It's around transportation and safety concerns. And so I think this investment is really important to make sure that when we're offering out of school time programs to our kids, that we can actually get them there safely. And so I'm excited to continue that, as well as the funding for the Disconnect Act to ensure we can get cell phones and devices out of our schools and get kids re-engaged. So thank you to the Budget Office, thank you to you, Chairman, and your entire team for many of these great investments. I do have a couple of questions about the RFK BSA, if I may.
Do I get to say no?
Yeah. So procedurally, if this comes out of the BSA, do we have the authority to move a standalone piece of legislation that deals with disposition of property in this way, or what is the hearing going to be based off of? Is it going to be a separate bill, or is it going to be more of a roundtable? What will be the vehicle that we're considering?
The hearing that's scheduled for July 29th and 30th will be on Bill 26-288.
And is that a bill that you've already introduced?
The bill was introduced last Friday.
Okay, and it mirrors the language of the BSA?
It's identical, other than, of course, changing the section numbers.
Okay, and that bill, I presume to be introduced, has been kind of reviewed by our own OGC and is all allowable.
It is in order for it to have been introduced. And I've discussed that with our general counsel.
Will it be in order to have passed?
Yes.
Okay. You just said as introduced. I don't know if you're making that distinction.
No, I was not
purposely.
making that
Okay.
distinction.
Okay, great. And so there'll be 2 days of hearings.
Yes.
And then we will move
act
forward.
as quickly as we can.
Okay.
And as I indicated, I think in response to Councilmember Felder, we will by then have the 3 reports. And trying to remember, the commanders have been exceedingly forthcoming in providing us with information that we requested. Not so the case with the couple items we've requested from the executive. I think at this point, we may have everything we need from the executive. And so we'll have all that by the hearing dates, and we'll be in a better position to have had conversations with the commanders.
Okay, and when are we expected to receive the consultant report?
I will be seeing a draft next week, and I expect it will be shortly thereafter.
Okay, so the initial date of the June 30th, is that going to be late?
What's June 30th?
The last time as a body, we had this conversation in the language of the contract, I thought it said that the report would be issued to us by June 30th, which is next Monday.
I don't remember that at all.
You remember that? Okay.
No.
I could be wrong. That's not a trick question. I just thought that was the date.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do we have an expected date that we'll receive the TAFA?
I'm not aware of a date. What I'm told is it's roughly 4 weeks from when they get all the materials from the commanders. And I know that OCFO has been meeting with the commanders, at least, well, they've been meeting with them. So I do not know if all the information has been given to the OCFO. I'm assuming it has been, and the OCFO is working arduously to produce the TAFA.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I look forward to continuing to work together to make sure that we can invest in this once in a lifetime opportunity. For
The Robert Bob report should be very soon. The economic impact analysis should be, I think, shortly thereafter, and the TAFA should be by the end of July. I'm hopeful that it'll be the middle of July.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Nadeau.
Thank you, Chairman, to you and your staff for your hard work on the budget. The committee's report has some strong recommendations which are necessary to lay the foundation for stronger schools and government operations. I'm grateful to see the committee taking steps to uphold our commitment to educators on H-1B visas. The $236,000 investment to fund an additional attorney and support permanent residency sponsorship recognizes how essential these educators are to our dual language and bilingual programs and the students who rely on them. And this is especially crucial in Ward 1, where we rely heavily on our bilingual educators to support and engage our English language learner students. Also excited to see that after strong community advocacy, funding has been allocated to budget for the Bancroft Annex. Grateful to you for your work funding Bridge the Gap, the New Heights program, OST facility costs, the DCSAA subtitle being struck. Huge thank you for preserving the legislation that I introduced and that this council put into place just not even 10 years ago. And thank you for the work that you continue to do on schools first compliance. We are definitely making progress here after many years of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There's still critical work to be done, particularly around community schools, which was completely eliminated in the mayor's proposed budget. We need at least $2.48 million to restore the program and $4.5 million to expand it. And community schools provides vital integrated support services for our students and family through trusted community partners like the Latin American Youth Center, which is facing significant reductions under the proposed budget. And these cuts would directly affect hundreds of young people, and I look forward to working with you in the big committee of the whole to identify this funding. Just a few other concerns that stood out to me, as was mentioned earlier, the $10 million budget gap for the Pay Equity Fund, $20 million gap for the child care subsidy, and $350,000 in dedicated funding for the educator wellness grants. So still some work to do despite the tremendous work of the committee of the whole here. Thank you for all of your efforts. This committee's budget includes important investments in equity, student well-being, and in educators and programs that lift them up. So really proud to be able to vote in support of this today and work with you as it moves forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau. Councilmember Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is an arduous task to merge the needs of so many different groups to form a cohesive budget in a year that has been particularly challenging. And I thank you and your team for your dedicated work on this budget. A special shout out to your education staff, who my team has worked pretty closely with. I want to praise your team for the restoration of two housing code inspector positions, a program manager, and two investigator positions, which will aid in addressing the housing code violations that our residents face in their homes and promote more environmentally friendly properties. I'm grateful for the expansion of funds used to support the administrative expenses of the Commission on Arts and the Humanities, and look forward to the capital improvements of some of DC's most iconic theaters, including the National Theater, Howard Theater, and Lincoln Theater. I'm also grateful for the committee's recommendation to remove the RFK campus subtitle in favor of it being introduced as a standalone permanent bill. I agree with you that to revitalize the RFK Stadium and its surrounding areas is a task that we should not take lightly, nor should it be rushed. It deserves measured and careful consideration and input from our residents to ensure that bringing the commanders home, should that be the ultimate decision, keeps residents housed here as well. Mr. Chairman, I also understand the constraints we are all operating under this year, but I did not see funding for the auditor components of the Road Act to improve functionality at DRS. In my committee, I was proud to recommend funding for the DRS component of the bill, and would like to work with you to fund at least part of the auditor functions moving forward. In the education cluster, I'm grateful for the new investment in FTEs at OSSI to advance the work that you and I initiated through the School Improvement Amendment Act of 2024. I'm grateful for the inclusion of structured literacy, a long time coming. I will say there is more needed for us to double down on our efforts in math, but I look forward to working with you as the budget moves to the full council. And I appreciate the restoration of funds to DCPS to restore the permanent residency visa program for educators on work visas. And my colleague, Councilmember Nadeau, already touched on that in large part. As has been the case in every committee thus far, there are programs we wish we could fund, but haven't or can't. And I understand that Cal was unable to fund the community schools program, which has done fantastic work in Noise in Ward 5. My understanding is that the funding levels for the Pay Equity Fund and the Child Care Subsidy Program continue to fall short of demand and need. And I am committed to working with you and other colleagues to do everything we can to preserve these essential programs. I do have a few questions. One is, I see in the school's first approach, Mr. Chairman, you're giving Langdon um, additional funds in its budget, and I wanted to know if you would be amendable for those funds to be flexible. And one of the things I've heard from the Langdon team is the desire to purchase a certain curriculum. There's also a desire of the PTO to get rid of the what some would say is the offensive and outdated marquee that still displays what some would say is an offensive Native American image. And so again, appreciate the additional funds, but wanted to know how rigid your expectation is that those funds go to school functions versus the purchasing of curricula, or if they wanted to replace the marquee.
If you were here, you would see my face. We generally, our position is that we want the principal and the school to have a high degree of autonomy. So other than our coding the funds as personal services or non-personal services, it's up to the school. I'm aware that there are schools that have used uh, funding that we've gotten for them. I'm thinking actually of the at-risk concentration weight, that they've used that for a different, to purchase a different curriculum. So there's no issue there. And I think the only issue, if they use it for a facility purpose like the sign, is whether the community is okay with that, which, and when I say community, I mean the school community. And I'm assuming, listening to you, that they are. So
Yes,
there's
yes.
not that kind of
Okay.
restriction.
Okay, a couple of more. I would just say on the cuts to the school contracting, and I just would ask if you, and I'm happy to follow up after if it's better to follow up then. You note in the committee print that you're reducing some of the contracts with DCPS for school testing. And we may just be in two different places here. I do have some pause with the council taking that action, without there being sufficient understanding of the assessment strategy. And so just wanted to know if you can provide a little bit of rationale there.
I'll try. I sort of chuckled as you were asking the question because we hear at the hearings from teachers and more teachers and other teachers, there is way too much testing. And we actually want to test to find out if Johnny learned any more English this week than he knew last week. And my view of it is that if a teacher has any skill, they already know students who are learning or not learning, and they don't need to test that on a weekly basis. There are more tests than I can count that go on in schools. We looked at two contracts. One is MAP and the other is ANET for ELA. And I believe ANET was eliminated for math. This is in high school. So this is just kind of parallel to that, although it's coming from us rather than from the chancellor. I could answer you a little bit differently. You know, the council is the appropriator. We have the power of the purse. We need to remember that. We have gotten a lot of testimony about how much testing there is. What am I getting at here? That there's testing when there could be teaching, that there's taking tests when there could be learning. And we've had conversations at our hearings with the chancellor about there are too many tests. And the answer is, well, that we get some answer, but there are still too many tests. So this is really, I would say, a minimal step on the part of the appropriators to say, well, we think there are too many tests, so we're not going to fund these two contracts. There is still $4.5 million for testing contracts in DCPS.
I will say in full disclosure, I used to work for the Achievement Network, or ANET. And that is not why I'm asking these questions, but it is because of that experience that I do have
Beautiful
concern
test, I'm
about.
sure.
Yes, but in all seriousness, I do have serious concern about us taking that approach versus asking DCPS to advance a reduction. I will say I sympathize with teachers who feel they are overtest. However, there are different purposes for different tests, whether that's formative, summative assessments, etc. And there are system-wide reasons why DCPS as an agency needs access to how students are performing. So I would agree with you. Yes, the average teacher may know how students are performing. The chancellor and his team also needs to know system-wide how schools and teachers are performing so that they can deliver support. So I'm happy to talk more about that offline, but I do have serious concerns about the council weighing in on that level of a agency decision instead of just asking them to reduce
Well,
it.
we don't have to exercise the power of the purse, but I think there are enough tests that are left that between the teachers and the principals and the instructional superintendents and the chancellor and everybody else, that they have a pretty good idea of how students are performing. There are a lot of other tests left in the system.
Okay.
But I will
I'm
add
gonna
one
keep.
other thing, and that is that, as has always been the case, my practice at least, is that if an agency really feels really, really strongly that this particular contract should be kept, give us another contract that doesn't need to be kept.
I think that's fair. I just would rather DCPS make that decision versus us inflict unintended consequences by making it. I did want to come to RFK, and I know some of this has already come up. While I don't want us to negotiate this publicly, or I'm not asking you to, rather, I did just want to ask two questions that have not come up. Do we have a deadline for when the council will vote on this standalone measure, being that you're taking it out of the BSA, which I support, by the way? And has the commanders confirmed their willingness to extend the exclusivity? We've heard from the mayor repeatedly that if this isn't voted on by July 15th, we're going to lose the exclusivity deal. So have they confirmed they're willing to extend that? And do we have a date for when we might vote on the bill?
I will answer you carefully to say that we, meaning uh, my office and the commanders, are working together. We are working cooperatively, and we are working as quickly as possible.
Okay, I'm going to read between the lines that I'll follow up with you afterwards. And I'll just end with the Commission on the Arts. They did circulate a response to the committee report. There was one section that jumped out at me, and I would love for you to weigh in, where the committee report talks about the agency not honoring or following the law as it per the findings of the OIG, and giving grants to non-district residents. The Commission on the Arts is asserting that that's not their interpretation of the code, that they can give grants to non-district residents. I would just say, as someone that has been beating the drum that we need to do more for district residents, I would err on the side of the committee print, that we need to be giving grants to district residents. But I did want to just give you an opportunity to speak to that, given that we did receive that note from the agency.
Well, I think it's no secret with colleagues that I have not looked with favor on the way the commission has approached grants. It seems to be as enthusiastic as possible to give out as many grants with a lot of issues around it. This particular issue of non-residents was uncovered by the Inspector General. This is not the committee saying, oh, gosh, this is what we think is going on, or even, oh, gosh, this is what's going on. This was the Inspector General who did an audit and who identified the, these grants that were to non-residents. And so the committee report just simply emphasizes that that is an issue with the grants. Since you brought it up, there are also, the commission seems to have had as a goal for the last couple of years to simply increase the number of grants it gives rather than have another strategy like with promoting economic development or maintaining stability for arts organizations, or even targeting arts organizations, arts groups that are struggling a bit. There's no strategy. And so there's one a theater that actually saw their grant, their general operating support grant, cut by over $100,000, by 60%. I think actually there were several that were cut by over 60%. So I'm getting beyond your question, but their grant making is very troublesome.
Understood. Well, thank you for that. I, again, would just say I agree with the OIG then that we should be issuing grants to district residents and not to Maryland residents.
Yes.
But I will end there. Thank you, Chairman, for all of your work on this committee print.
Thank you. Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. A lot's been covered. I'll try to be brief. On the visa issue, thank you very much for what you've done. Interesting about the reaction of the executive. I will want to hear more about that. I think this is a thing we don't just want to do as a symbol, but we actually want to help people. So be curious to learn more about that. On St. Coletta, thank you again for doing that. It is a shame that we have to do it year after year. We need a sustainable solution there. On DC Futures, thank you for protecting it for the people who are in it. I do think it serves an important function, and we do want to look over the horizon on how we can continue to do this kind of work. I think at UDC, they're standing up the Student Success Center, which does a number of the functions that the DC Futures program does. Maybe there are other things that we can do to support UDC so that we can replicate what's been done through the DC Futures, but primarily through UDC. The Bridge the Gap Fund, thank you very much for doing that. The State Athletic Association, again, thank you for that. I too want to hear the snapping, so community schools and teacher wellness. Echo Councilmember Louis George, who raised the issues about the archives and the Boys and Girls Club. Those are going to be things, there's going to be a bunch of things that in the next couple of weeks, which will be intense weeks, that we are going to want to raise and talk about and lift up, that despite all of the great work done here, there still remains a lot that needs to be done. I'll end on RFK. I think, clearly appropriate to take it out of the BSA. No way on God's green earth we could responsibly have voted on this by July 15th. And anybody who would want to hold us to that, it's not good faith. And so I have to face 80,000 residents of Ward 3 who expect me to do my due diligence and look closely at this deal and make sure that we get the best deal for the District of Columbia, if there is to be a deal. Now, you have talked about, people push you on timeline, and it requires reading between the lines. The hearing will be the 29th and the 30th. It's good that there's that predictability that's been established. I would not want anyone, because I think somebody could hear you say that by July 30th, we'll have everything. At the end of the day, on July 30th, we'll have heard all the testimony. We'll have all the reports in. Hopefully we'll have the TAFA. That means the next week we can act, because we cannot. We have to digest all of that information. We need to work together as a council. You need to work with the commanders. This isn't a thing that happens immediately. We need predictability about when it's going to be done. But there has to be a recognition that in this period that we're working in now, it's an intense period working on this budget. And we didn't get everything from the executive immediately, partly because they were seized with the budget at the time, and they had to focus on the budget and get that to us, and then they needed to get other things to us. There needs to be a recognition of that. We need a reasonable amount of time, not forever, but a reasonable amount of time for us to digest the information, be thoughtful and deliberative, work with the commanders, and get to a result. I suspect they need predictability, but everyone needs to be respectful of our need as an institution to do this properly. And that doesn't mean that once we have everything on July 30th, that we're ready to go. It's going to take longer than that. Thank you very much. And thank you to you and your team for your work on this budget report.
Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for giving me a moment. My colleagues have covered a lot of territory, and thanking you, the committee, for the work that you've done, particularly on the matter of the Department of Housing and the whole issue regarding education. But I just wanted to thank you for, I see something included in the budget, the $304,000, I'm sorry, $236,000, which is for an attorney that is going to support the permanent residency visas. And on behalf of the Washington Teachers Union, I know they've been very anxious about this issue, as some of their experts in the education community are very nervous about continuing to be members of our society. So I just wanted to thank you for that. I also wanted to just ask a little bit. You mentioned in your report a little bit about truancy, and you point out that the truancy money is in the Department of Human Services. And that's true, but it certainly affects our educational product and the outcome for our students. So I hope that Cal, the committee of the whole, will not let up on addressing that issue. It is critical to the results that our young people get through their educational activities. I want to thank you for the out of school time and the Learn 24, that whole process is something that we can say it is a good activity for educational activity. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the DC Futures. And I note that you're saying that the committee is working to fully restore the funding for FY26, but the committee fully expects the mayor to continue this investment in her proposed FY27. I think it's a program that is important. It is a program that gives us an opportunity to move the dial, particularly as it relates to the scholars, and it sends a message that the district, if we are not going to fund it this year, that perhaps we're retreating on funding this important activity. And then I want to talk a little bit about the archives and hope that you will work with me and the committee to make sure that we do move the archives forward. That's one of the biggest issues. And then I wanted to just mention, I heard here a couple of things about the RFK campus. And, you know, I just have a little concern because one of my colleagues said that we need to have input from community, as if community isn't inputting weekly, because at least my social media feed shows me that there are meetings every week. So I just want the public to not be misinformed, but to know that there are meetings with individuals, Oklahoma Avenue, et cetera, that are having comment as it relates to what they would like to see at the campus. And I'm hoping that that will continue. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your work and your team.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. You raised an issue that I wanted to speak to. This is more general, but the approach that is in the proposal before us, but also that we've talked about as we get to the full council voting legislatively on the budget, is that the way the mayor has structured the budget and the way that I think we have to approach the budget is to look at that which we can do in FY26. And so, for example, DC Futures is not only is a good program, but so it ought not to be discontinued, but just to keep the students who are in it now supported until they graduate. So as I recall, there are a percentage that will graduate at the end of this coming year, and then a percentage that will graduate at the following year. It may just be the following year is the last year, I don't remember. We would have to find more funding to be able to fund it on a recurring basis. This is the same problem, but even greater with, for instance, the pay equity program, in which there's $70 million. The mayor sent down a budget with $70 million for 1 year. Like, is she really intending to go through this again next year and defund it? I would hope not. But what we did last year was we found $280 million. That's 4 times 70 million. So it was funded on a recurring basis to the financial plan. And then the mayor only proposes it 1 year and took the 210 million. Well, I'm not of a view that we keep having to cut different things in order to fund things on a recurring basis, which they ought to be paid for on a recurring basis, if she's just going to take the money. So I think it's a very unfortunate approach, but that's what we're doing. That's what the approach is with DC Futures program. That at least for the students who are in the program, they ought to still be supported. The report makes that clear. They ought to still be supported, that the mayor ought to send out a budget next year that supports them. That's clearly our intent. But we're not going to keep playing this game where we come up with money that she then just redirects the following year.
Chairman, I appreciate that response and hear you loud and clear. And it just leads me to think maybe we have to have a clear understanding that there are programs that we talk about a 4-year financial plan. Maybe we have a 2-year financial plan on some issues so that we can have continuation. I am very concerned that we are not placing emphasis on the nexus between education and employment. Yet we say in this community, someone told me who is in this professional arena, I won't say who, but one of the directors made a point of saying that for every adult resident of DC, there is a job in DC. Now, when I look at how many DC residents are in jobs, it goes down to 25%. So my thing is, we have to do whatever we have to do to make sure that we are funding the education to employment pipeline. And so that's why I get nervous. And you assigned this committee to me. I'm taking it seriously, and I push this issue everywhere I go. So that's what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion with regard to the committee proposal? The vote is on the report and recommendations of the committee of the whole. As I noted, there were some corrected charts that were sent out, I guess, last night, maybe not corrected, but charts that were sent out last night and some other fixes. And I should say that my motion is with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. All those in favor say aye. Are there any opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Before we adjourn, I just want to note, since we're talking budget, I had mentioned at maybe our last meeting that I had written the mayor after the June 5th decision by the DC Court of Appeals upholding a trial court's decision that the agency budget enhancement requests are public documents. The mayor did not respond, not only did not provide the agency enhancement requests, but did not even respond to the letter. So I wrote the mayor again this week, reiterating the request that the council receive all of the agency budget enhancement requests for the FY26 budget. So that issue's still in play. Still in play as in, well, the court's resolved it, but the mayor needs to produce those documents. If there's no further business? Oh, there is further business, as is our custom. I do want to thank all the folks who've worked on the budget. I will thank them again when we vote first reading. But with regard to the committee of the whole staff, Evan Cash, Committee and Legislative Director, Blaine Stum, Deputy Committee Director, the education team, got a shout out from one of the council members earlier, Bijan Verlin, Aaliyah McNeely, Hannah Kozik. Is there clicks that's in order? Christian Washington, who's special counsel, Andy Eisenlohr, Averill Caraway, Ann Phelps, and the entire budget office. Somehow the budget director is left off of this list. We'll thank her too. Dan Golden and Lauren Mendonca from the Office of the General Counsel and the Office of the Secretary's team, especially the support services staff, who sometimes have to stay with us until 12:30 in the morning. So thank you to everyone. And that is going to conclude the business of this meeting. The time is 5:02 p.m. and this meeting's adjourned.